Good afternoon to you all, and welcome to the second in the MIT Energy Initiative Seminar Series. I'm very pleased to introduce this month's speaker. Over lunch, Harish asked me to just say his first name and last name, and that's all. And I said I might do a little bit more than that, but I did promise that I wouldn't embarrass him. So Harish Hande is the founder and managing director of SELCO-INDIA, which is the solar electric lighting company of India. And it's an organization that provides solar installations for rural families, people who have typically been considered unable to afford solar energies, and yet he's been able to raise the business to the point where they've got 65,000 customers. And he'll be talking to us today about how he did that and also other issues about energy services for the poor. He received his PhD from the Solar Engineering Program at UMass Lowell. And I did say I wouldn't embarrass him, but you should know he's one of the leaders in the field of providing energy services to the poor. He's founded several international committees and councils on this issue and has received numerous awards. And he's really a guiding light in thinking about how do you make things that are traditionally unaffordable affordable to the poor. And he's expanded beyond just solar systems to other energy services, other types of things, working in his home state of Karnataka and also expanding into Gujarat and other areas of India. So it's a great pleasure for me to introduce Harish Hande at today's speaker series. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. I should thank Amy for calling me here to give a talk on this. I will start off with a story of a call that I got a couple of years ago from a person in one of the villages. He called me up and said, I'm trying to get my daughter married, and the person who is the house that she has to go in has no electricity, and my daughter is refusing to get married and go there because there is no light in their house. So he called and said, I'm going to sponsor, go and install the light in her future husband's house without telling that I paid for it, so at least I can get my daughter married. The second is, there was this lady, this is who had bought a light. She was poor, she has a very small house. And typically we asked her, why did you put solar? I mean, she said, we thought she would give an answer that kerosene is bad and it's harmful for my kids, etc., etc. The first reason she said was that my kids study till late, 9 o'clock. I am a laborer, day laborer. I work on the roads, I work on the fields. I have to wake up early in the morning, I have to cook. But I want my kids to have a better life, and that's why they need to study. But my question, this one is, in the evenings, my daughter who is studying starts to droop. And she might droop on a kerosene lamp anytime. And that will never give me proper sleep. So I have to be awake till they finish their studies. So I sleep very late and I have to get up early. And that's exactly why I put up solar lights, because now I'm not worried whether she droops or does not droop. Right. I'm telling these two stories is, where are the economics? When we all say, is solar comparable, solar expensive, where is the economics? If both these stories were not based on selling them on Excel sheets. Look at what happened in the financial markets because of Excel sheets, right? That's what happened. You did not create, the financial markets did not create the assets. Here, we have a good saying in Selco that solar is expensive for the rich and affordable to the poor. It's the rich who need subsidies. You look at Germany, you look at California, you look at Italy, you look at Spain. You have feed-in tariffs, you have tax rebates, you have subsidies, etc., etc. But when it comes to the poor, this I always say, the best financial lesson, which I keep telling in Amy's class, is I have ever learned is from a street vendor in Bangalore who said 300 rupees a month is expensive, but 10 rupees a day is fine. Because she spends on a daily basis 15 rupees on kerosene. That's 450 rupees a month. You and me do not spend $10 for one light for 4 hours on a daily basis. Can you imagine if you had 5 lights? Are you going to spend $50 for 5 lights for 4 hours in the evening? That too kerosene? The poor, spend on that. Solar with 14% rate of interest financed could be provided to her at 8 rupees. So who says solar is expensive? The poor spend at least 10 to 12% of their income on energy services. Whether it's candles, whether it's the street vendors in Bangalore, whether it is Kampala, throughout the world people spend at least 10 to 15% on energy services. So the important aspect is when we talk about solar, it's not the solar technology. The solar panel is on the roof. Nobody is going to look at it. It's what it provides inside the house, whether it's 2 hours of lighting, 3 hours of lighting, whether it's going to power a sewing machine, etc., etc. Look at the need. We are so obsessed with technology. And we forget, when it comes down to the poor, we expect that whatever we have been using has to be marketed to them. That's completely untrue. We are basically challenging the intelligence of the poor. We actually do not have the time to sit with them and look at what they need and design the appropriate technology needs, the appropriate financial needs, the appropriate processes to go down to the doorstep of the people. We are so obsessed with quarterly numbers. We are so obsessed with standardization. We are obsessed with all these processes, IRRs, rate of returns, that we have forgotten that 70% of the world's population has hardly any use to what the developing world, and what I mean by the developed world, what I mean by the developed world is anywhere, the urban India, the rich of India, the rich in Europe, US, we do not create products that would be useful to the poor. We always talk about how do we create markets for the poor. Have we ever thought about how can we turn it down and say, how can the poor look at the rich for markets? How can the poor look at rich for how do we create a supply chain so that whatever we produce as poor, I mean when I talk from a poor's point of view, how can I look at the rich as a market? And there's a statement now everywhere which is an extremely vulgar statement that the market at the bottom of the pyramid is $5 trillion. We always think of selling it to the poor. Are we creating reverse supply chains where the rich buy from the poor? Until that does not happen, we are creating an unsustainable supply chain everywhere. What is going to happen? We are going to create countries like El Salvador and Nepal. It's going to have people taking up to guns. And that, for me, is a very unsustainable trend today. And for me, if I look across, I mean, especially if I meet a lot of people, my scary part is the difference in thought process. I mean, just to take example, I was in Davos this year, the World Economic Forum, and I was given a chance to moderate some 25, 30 CEOs. It was my most scariest 2 hours because at the end of it, I said, I will not hire any one of you. Extremely smart people, but so away from reality. There was an example given that there's a village with blah, blah, blah. How are you going to bring development to this village? 2 of the CEOs, which I'll name, of very big audit firms, there are only 4, so you can imagine 2 of them, said we're going to create an e-kiosk. Where is electricity, boss? Oh, yes, yes, yes. No, we'll have computers where people will know the rates of vegetables. I said there's no water, there's no electricity. At the end of it, at least one CEO said, we are so far away from reality, we have no solution for this group. And that's 70% of the population. So my question is, when it comes to the poor, it's all our responsibility, collective responsibility, to create appropriate solutions. And today, sustainable energies like solar, biogas, small wind, micro hydro are perfect in two ways. Not only in the environment is an added bonus. They are very good tools to alleviate poverty. You can't have a better option but to promote sustainable energies that can alleviate poverty. Because you look at this. If 70% today, around 56% of households in India, which is the so-called the second largest growing economy in the world, does not have electricity. 56% of the households. We are in the 21st century, and we are talking of 56% of the households in one country not having electricity. And right, what are we going to do? We all think that how do we provide sustainable electricity? So we are all thrilled to have this Indo-US nuclear pact. We are all thrilled to have coal-fired plants built one every week. Mind you, none of this will reach this 56% of the households. It will be taken up by industries. We do not have proper efficiency of transmission lines down to these places. What are we talking about? To exist, the rest of the 25, today in Bangalore, which is kind of looked up as the IT capital of the world, I have 4 hours of power cut. Forget the rural villages. And so-called India has infrastructure much better than other parts of the developing world. So I'm really scared, passionately scared about what's going to happen in Africa, what's going to happen in Latin America. And so today, when we built up SELCO, when we started SELCO in '94, it was started basically to destroy 3 myths. The 3 myths that poor cannot afford technologies, poor cannot maintain technologies, and you can't run a commercial venture while trying to meet social objectives. On these 3 bases, we built up SELCO, and today we have around actually 105,000 clients, individual households. Out of that, for 60% of them, solar electricity was the first form of electricity in their house, and they've all paid for at between 12 and 14%. And other 40% are people who already have the grid but are fed up with the unreliability of grid. We have around 25 centers where we said if a technology like solar has to succeed in the rural areas on a sustainable basis, we need to have a 2-pronged approach. One is a doorstep service, because as we keep saying, if you look at the villages right across the world, what do you see? Repair shops, right? Pump repair shops, cycle repair shops, bicycle repair shops, TV repair shops. Because a lot of us, urban folks, have taken the rural for a ride, dumped our technology, and ran away from there. A lot of the technologies that we have forced down the throat of rural folks actually don't work. Look at Africa. The development money that has gone into in terms of promoting the solar technology have been dumped. It's basically a lot of these European companies who have gone and dumped solar installations without after-sales service. So what has happened in many of these countries? There's a negative feedback that solar does not work. Because obviously you did not create the infrastructure, we did not create the training of local technicians, you did not create local businesses to promote solar technology in the way that the people would require. And so you have a lot of these technologies failed. So we said, let's create a doorstep service. The first thing rural people ask is, irrespective of this technology, and I keep saying that, is as long as we humans make anything, it's going to fail, right? We have not made anything that's perfect. So everybody says that solar is maintenance free. It is not maintenance free. It's not the solar panel on top of somebody's roof that's going to fail, but the rat is going to eat the wire inside somebody's house. The water in the in the battery might dry out. Who is going to maintain that? Everybody says, okay, the customers need to train. When you buy a TV, does anybody train you how to repair it? No. When you buy a car, yes, some people learn, but you also have garages to repair it. Why, when it comes to the poor, we said, no, they have to be taught how to repair it. Just because you want to reduce your own transaction cost. just because you want to bring up your IRR. So we created centers, 25 of them in the state of Karnataka, with the concept that how long does it take a technician in 2 hours to go and service a system. And that's, we organically then built up 25 centers. The second part of the fork was, how do you create doorstep financing? And we were very clear that we would not finance it ourselves, because as I was telling some of the students here, because you always have a conflict of interest once you have a after-sales service and a financing together. It has to be at arm's length because the strengths are very different. We thought, how can we piggyback on a very fantastic financial rural network that India has? Though it might take time, but let's leverage the money that's already there among these networks. It took us 3 years, 95, 96, 97, till people actually got sick of looking at our faces, the bankers. They would say, solar not related to income generation. So we only finance something that is directly linked to income generation, like agricultural produce, fertilizers, etc., etc. But solar lighting is not linked to income generation, we can't. But the fact was, solar energy or lighting, 4 hours of lighting leads to extra production, leads to a future investment if a kid starts studying. But bankers are bankers. It took them time, but fortunately it took us in 3.5 years, when one banker got interested, we said, can you give us a letter that you're interested in financing? He said, no, I'm sick of you guys. You go and finance 100 systems. I'll finance you 100 systems. So we said, before that, can you give us a letter? We basically took that letter to other financial institutions and said, they are financing, how come you're not? And that's how financing for rural solar actually started. Well, that was the easiest part, because the rural banks in India were very familiar with financing agricultural produce, like sugarcane farmer thrice a year, peanut farmer 4 times a year. Then you had paddy farmer once a year. Very structured cash flow dependent financing. So we piggybacked on that. But as years went by and we started getting deeper into the economic strata of the society, we needed more flexible and site-specific financing. And as I said, more flexible and site-specific is because as you go deeper into the economic strata, the cash flows become cash flows on a daily basis. Like, as I said, the street vendor or a street laborer, all they earn money on a daily basis. You ask them 10 rupees today, they'll give you 10 rupees today, but if you ask them 30 rupees in 3 days, they will not have 30 rupees in 3 days. And the bank said, we do not have the infrastructure to collect that money on a daily basis. Yes, you do have many of the microfinance institutions do that, but I personally find a lot of the microfinance institutions as professional money lenders. Nothing they have done but charged a lot of people at, I mean, a typical microfinance institution finances at 31%, right, where you and me don't pay. So the poorer I get, their interest rates go higher, right? But we thought that if the poor have to be financed and if poor have to be looked at, how do you provide energy services at the doorstep? You have to look at 2 things. What do they need? How do you create your technology that matches their need? And I'm emphasizing on the word need, because there's a big difference between need and want. And when you have need, you need to customize it. And when it's a want, you can standardize it. Because when it comes to the need, each person's individual requirement is very different to a neighbor's requirement. I'm sure a lot of people will ask me, doesn't that take transaction costs? Doesn't that raise the transaction cost? It does. It does. If we are responsible to remove poverty and provide energy services in a sustainable way, it will take time. The needs have to be looked at. Because I'll tell you, when people come and say that I want 4 lights, and when you design a 4-light system to typically a lot of these villagers, which costs around $450, for a person who is earning $350 or $400 over a period of 12 months, he suddenly says, oh, that's very, very expensive. But somebody needs to sit with them in their house and say, do you actually need 4 lights? Are you in the kitchen and the dining room at the same time? Are you at the study and the living room at the same time? So this is a brilliant innovation that one of our technicians came up with, was I'll give you 2 points, 4 points, but I'll give you 2 lights with a flexibility of when you're done with your cooking, remove your light and put it in the dining room. So it acts like a 4 light, right? If the technician had not done that innovation in that house, which all will complain that requires a lot of transaction costs, in 6 months, 20 other houses near that house wouldn't have had solar, right? Because suddenly people realized, okay, I can actually speak with the representative and see what type of solar system that I can have. That is the power of choice. And today, we are not giving the poor that power of choice. We all are in the bandwagon of creating low-cost products. Mind you, it's not the low-cost products. The easiest thing is to create a low-cost product which actually does not meet the actual need of the end user. When you look at the poor, you have to look at what does he or she need, how he and she can benefit from it, what is the outward present day cash flow of that family, what is going to be the perceived cash flow because of the intervention of this energy service, how can I create the appropriate financing to collect that amount of money, then how am I going to create an appropriate market linkages if that energy service leads to a perceived increase in increase in value for the household. For example, like if I am providing solar light system, 2 light system to a very poor basket weaver who is actually been doing 2 or 3 baskets, because of an increased light for 4 hours, he or she starts doing 4 more baskets. I have increased somebody's production, mind you. I have not increased somebody's income because the market for the baskets were only 4. Now she has doubled her baskets. Where is she going to sell it? Until and unless I do not create partners to buy those extra baskets, the technology is of no use. And that is what 40% or to 50% of the world population wants, is that linkage to markets. That is when I started, I said, why can't the poor look at the rich as the markets? Is until we do not create those market linkages, we can all talk about 1 rupee shampoos. How brilliant marketing strategy that 1 rupee shampoo was. If you look at one of the books called Bottom of the Pyramid, it's again, we are not giving the choice of where that 1 rupee has to be spent, whether it's 1 rupee of electricity, 1 rupee of clean water, or 1 rupee of shampoo. We are all selling them 1 rupee of shampoo, right? So when we develop technologies, we need to sit with them, design the appropriate need, appropriate financing, appropriate market methods, create assets. And that is what today the world actually needs to do. How do we create all these chains? So when we started building up, I know everybody has a question, doesn't it take time? It takes time, and that's why we have a standard joke in our company today that in 1994 when we started Selco, American Express spat out Lehman Brothers. We are still there, right? It takes time, but we will be there. So in 2001, I was given a big lecture. Now I can actually talk. I can keep digging at these guys. But we were given a big lecture when we talked about our financing model. If we have to scale up, we need to scale up the processes. We need to scale up the awareness among bankers about what it means with the technology. I was given a hardcore lecture at the World Bank how I should follow the Fannie Mae model. And they said, like, Fannie Mae, look at Fannie Mae. And then we said, look at what? The ease of credit is going to help everybody. This is, who said this? The World Bank. Ease of credit. I said, see, that's not going to happen in rural India because a lot of these bankers are very rigid, blah, blah. And that's exactly what happened. For everything, I said, look at how the bankers in India over the period of year created the process and knew at what point of time credit checks, what point of time credit evaluation, what type of at what intervention that you need to give in money. I agree that 80% of the time they're very inefficient, but take advantage of 20% of the time. So when it comes to the poor, it will take time. I mean, I'm emphasis on that, it will take time, because if you, and the scary part today is, I again come back, we are not creating need-based technologies. And why am I emphasizing today is, I'm coming back to, I was talking to Amy Smith. You're all aware of iPods. You're all aware of LCD TVs, right? You're all in, and this is the heart of technology institution in the world. But we have not created a single cook stove for the poor that will last more than 6 months. No cook stove in the world that can replace the only technology that has survived the Stone Age. This is the 3-stone cooker. We have been able to develop a good cooker. And 70% of the world's population cooks on that stupid cooker. Can you go and tell a poor person in Africa, and can you go and tell a poor person in India, don't cut wood, don't use kerosene, because it's bad for the environment? They have no choice. So you and me are equally responsible today. If a girl child who goes and collects wood in all these countries, and we create a mass of uneducated women 10 years down the line, you and me are equally responsible. Forget the boundaries of countries here. We are creating a world of uneducated women right across the world. We have not developed. Everybody gets, I'm sometimes amazed and sick to see so much of line standing to buy an iPhone, while 70% do not have even access to a good cook stove. Amy has been slogging and working on it. I hope there's more support to people like Amy to do that. But that's why my question is, we are so away, we are getting so away from reality today that there's so many unsustainable trends that are happening in terms of whether thought process, our creating of process of how do we reach the poor, creating what type of technologies and type of financing that then create. So we started this in 95. Today we have around 170 odd employees in SELCO. We are a for-profit. We are a for-profit structure. But as of, I'm also, on October 1st, our shareholding changed. All my investors are non-profits, but we are a for-profit. And this is another chance that I keep digging at the NGOs, that the for-profit structure that we created in 94, I would still go back and create a for-profit structure, because when a lot of the NGOs, when they create need-based technologies or try to create a need-based technologies, never ever do it on a very sustainable basis. And I'm a big fan of for-profit because you exactly know where your losses are. How do you reduce your losses? How do you create appropriate sustainable process to reach different segmentations? And you evaluate your processes year by year. And that does not happen in NGOs. And that only a for-profit structure can actually provide you with that flexibility of doing it. So coming to our future, and what we are looking at is, we've done solar. Not that we've done, in terms of solar technology to 110 houses, but what we found was in 2005 was how external factors can nearly kill you. If you remember, in 2004, 2005, Germany came up with a huge subsidy package for solar lighting systems. World over, people applauded Germany for being green. But what we didn't realize, that it killed solar in most of the developing world. Germany, with its huge subsidy program, sucked up the world's solar panels. Indian-made solar panels were sold in Germany at 47% cheaper than what it was sold in India. The shortage of panels for the rural poor right across the 3 continents killed many of the solar companies in Africa, Latin America, and India because of this one subsidy program in Germany. I, as a solar person, I was very thrilled when the Green Party won, but I, as a rural person, was praying that the Green Party in Germany would lose. I'm again scared by the huge subsidy that California is coming up with. Because people in California, people in Germany have a choice. Have already, it's better to go on energy efficiencies. No amount of solar, whether you talk about Germany or whether California, Italy, or Spain, is going to have a blip on climate change, blip. But providing solar to millions of poor who will get away from kerosene and cutting wood, we do not have that in the calculations on a daily basis, is going to contribute more positively towards climate change, and we all should look at it very, very seriously. So when this happened, we were completely jittery that we have done 14 or 15 years of work, and we have all our apples in one basket. We said, how can we diversify? Let's look. We already created an infrastructure. So we started looking at individual houses as an energy black box and said, where else can we make an intervention so that the quality of life, savings, earnings, etc. can be taken care of. And the second technology we started looking was at cooking. Because for many of the households, when we put up a brilliant light system, we were feeling very guilty that you have a brilliant light, but the walls are completely black. But if the walls are so black, can you imagine the lungs of the woman? So we said, had I been the owner, the first preference for me should have been cooking. But we have taken it as a way of life that she is going to spend 4 to 6 hours there. Who cares? Who really cares? But we said, let's look at cooking as a second intervention. Sometime in the future, we would like to look at biogas and drying. And our aim is to basically look at 200,000 additional households in 3 to 4 years in the span of Karnataka and in Gujarat. People said, are you going to expand geographically? No, our main aim is how do we get deeper and deeper into the economic strata. We have done a bit. We are on the tip of the iceberg. How do we look at different financial innovations? I have an innovations team that basically looks at financial, technology, marketing, process, innovations at one go. They don't look at one part of it and say, how can it be replaced? And so I have a couple of people who actually, now we make a lot of fun because they used to look at what is asset securitization, how can it be taken and look at, how can we implement that for the poor? And how was the Three Gorges Dam in China financed? And how can that parts of it could be implemented for the poor? So we look at all that and see, okay, at what position, which are the innovations that can be taken from people who have already done the hard work and implement towards the poor. And you will see that many of these technology innovations, financial innovations, process innovations can be done, but it cannot be done like just replicating what's happened in the so-called rich world. And I come back criticizing my own country, saying that today, and we are in a position today, as we say, we are hiding behind the poor. And what I define by hiding behind the poor, if you look at the Greenpeace's latest report on hiding behind the poor, a rich Indian who earns more than 30,000 rupees a month, which a lot of middle class do that, does 4.95 tons of CO2 per year. An average Westerner, European or American, does 5.05. The rich Indian is not very far in polluting than an average Westerner. But India's average is 1.67. That is because the average of 70% of the poor is 1.11. The rich in India is cleverly hiding behind the poor. Very cleverly, in fact. And so it's dangerous both for India and China to point fingers at the West, while 70% of their population can actually leapfrog in technologies, create sustainable technologies for the 70% of the population, show the world that sustainable technology can make sense. Irrespective of how much of energy efficiency we talk of in the Western world, it's not going to until we create sustainable technologies for the poor. And that is where I'm scared that India and China are just hiding behind the poor and creating excuses that you have polluted, give us a chance to pollute. And if India itself, with taking the we're building one plant a week, even having inherited the British bureaucracy, that it's scary, one a week, right? One a week of at least 1,000 megawatt coal-fired plant we are building. Now that we are so thrilled that we have an India-US nuclear deal, extremely thrilled. But where are we getting the coal from? We have, our coal has 40% ash. We're going to import coal from Australia. Whom are we going to do that? To the industries. The poor are going to remain poor in 10 to 15, 20 years, are going to remain poor. And the whole 8%, 9% growth today that we say as the second fastest growing economy, who has grown 8 to 9%? It's the middle class, upper middle class, which has become richer. The rich have become richer, but the poor have remained poor. So, but my question, what am I driving? Is you and me both have to be serious, cutting across country boundaries, creating appropriate technology solutions for the poor in an affordable, and what I mean by affordable does not mean low cost, creating appropriate financial aspects to the rural areas so that they can have access to technologies that are very much need-based. I keep repeating the need-based because I'm sick of so much technologies that come down to our doorstep. As I keep telling that we have so much of technology, we try to fit the problem to the solution. You come up with solution, or which is the problem today, we need to fit it. We said we will come up with the problems and somebody needs to fit those solutions. Talk to urban poor. I have spoken about the rural poor. Urban poor, which is growing. We all say by 2020, 50% of the world will live in urban areas. What is happening in urban areas? Very simple. You go to Ahmedabad, state in Gujarat, right? The urban poor is basically a workplace for a lot of people to work during the daytime in their houses and then go out to work in the night for selling their wares. I'll just give you a small example. She starts working at 6 in the morning till 8 in the evening for some snacks, and then she goes out in the evening and sells those snacks for 2 hours. We were asked, can you design a solar system? Because the electricity that she is paying for is very expensive. So when I design a solar for 12 hours, she's going to run away. She's not even going to buy from it. She said it's very, very expensive for 12 hours of electricity. But when we went to her house, we basically changed a simple thing. We changed part of the roof to a glass tile. And which I was telling to one of our professors here, glass tile. So I have reduced the use of solar from morning 6 to evening 7. I have designed solar for only 1 hour. So these are solutions. Typically, a typical company goes and says, no, solar is not feasible for them. You get away. When you get away, you have also missed the point what extra intervention you could have done in that particular household. And mind you, the energy efficiencies that we calculated in 4 to 5 slums in the city of Ahmedabad alone was leading to a savings of 1 megawatt. Talk about energy efficiencies in the slums right across India. The largest slums in Bombay. We do not need to build one coal-fired plant every week. And that's because today the government of India or any of the developing world wants to grow. Truly, yes, I understand from that. But the fact is, I'm failing to understand when the world over people say that we have to eradicate poverty. But today I'm saying that we have shown a bit. We still have a long way to go. But I think the position where I have seen over the 15, 20 years, 15, 80 years, it's not, I say, an emotional plea to all of you, but a pragmatic plea is that please think seriously for the other side of the world by spending time. And time does not mean research. It's easy to go to Google and write papers about it. But that will not give you the solutions. Spend time on the ground. You guys are extremely talented people. And I want you guys to spend time is looking at what the needs are, because you are in the best position to come up with the appropriate solutions because you have the brains, you have the access to technology, you have the resources to do it. Stop. I mean, I see a lot of students. I would be very glad if students come and say to me, I want to work in the rural areas rather than I want to study your model. I'm sick of studying of models, frankly speaking, because as we say in SELCO, failures are replicable, successes are not. You can easily replicate a failure, but successes are because it's site-specific, people were there were a lot of parameters which you cannot write off. When I say, why, oh, I will take a SELCO model and take it to Africa. But SELCO model was done because of the people who are existent in it. Google was done because of people who were there. You can't take just a Google model and replicate it somewhere. Similarly, you cannot take a SELCO model and say that I want to replicate in Africa. You can take some of the variables which are constants. But there are so many site-specific variables to many models which I cannot put it down to paper. But I see so many. Yes, it's good that the social entrepreneurship is gaining up around the world, but I'm kind of sick of model studying. How does SELCO model compare to this model in Africa, Harish? What's the difference? Does it matter? Does it actually matter? Because for every country, you need to go dirty your hands, know what the solutions are, and come up and implement those. There's no substitute to hard work, and for me, I'm very cynical. For me, hard work is dirtying your hands. No, I'm actually, until we get 200 to 300 students a year to our office in Bangalore, and mind you, it's the students that actually come and say that I actually want to see a process and see whether it's efficient or not, who write on my face. That's the student I'm so admire. Not that, okay, can I write about your SELCO model because in Africa we need it. And I think that culture of dirtying your hands, coming down to, because see, the thing is that if you look at what has happened in the financial markets today, lot of has happened because a lot of people did not dirty their hands. It was all studying their models and creating feedback loops and feedback loops and feedback loops. So it's high time that I tell the younger generation, and I feel the pain because, you know, we've done it for 15, 20 years. I hardly see trickle of youngsters who come down to our office and say, I want to do it. I'll be the next person who can go to a different state, different country. I will implement it, know what it takes to do it. I do not find that in the younger generation. I do not find the passion that was there in the early 90s when people said sustainable energy makes sense. Today I get more people in tie suits, venture capitalists who want 25% IRRs to do in clean tech, looking at technology as the main point, not the process at the down point. But we need youngsters, and youngsters like you who can do it. So it's something that can be easily done, can be done, but it takes a bit of hard work. Don't take the easy route of passing from here and taking a high-paid job. That's the easiest thing most of you guys can do. Do something tougher, guys, because the world needs you. Thanks, Amy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harish. I think we have time for questions and discussion. So if there are questions or comments from the audience, we'd be happy to take those now. And please, if anyone has any comments they'd like to share or questions that they'd like to ask Harish.
Talk about 170 people who were there in your company. So do you recruit from the villages that you serve, from the local people that you serve, or do you recruit only from, let's say, what kind of people do you?
No, as somebody has asked me what kind of people we had, the question was what type of people do you recruit from the villages, or the 25 centers that we have are people who speak the language but the language in the local accent. Because all the 25 areas, if you have, speak the same language, but they speak the language in different accents. So we pick up people from that village. So there's inherently, I'm doing two things. One is, yes, we're picking up people from there. Also creating a trust among the villagers that I'm not going to run away. I'm not going to run away. And in terms of qualification, frankly speaking, as I was telling sir, out of the 170 people, we have only one engineer, that's me. And I haven't touched a solar panel in last 4 years. That's scary, right? But we have anthropologists, we have biologists, we have like most of our ground staff in terms of our 25 officers are 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade dropouts who can actually design a system much better because of their own experience. But it has to be local from there. Create an office with local infrastructure. That's the best way to do it, actually. Yes, sir.
I have one of my rooms, basically, I think, close to what you installed. 2 small LED solar powered lights and a hand crank solar radio. So I work with this stuff on my own and I think about it. That combination between a hand crank or a foot treadle or this human dynamo and a little bit of solar, I think is very interesting. And I read recently that somebody in India has applied that idea to the charka, the spinning wheel,
right,
obviously, so that you can charge a battery at the same time that you're spinning the thread. And I wrote about this a couple of years ago as a solar Swadeshi. In Afghanistan, U.S. and NATO forces distributed solar dynamo AM FM shortwave radios, but they could only charge the dedicated internal hardwired battery. They couldn't charge AA batteries or D-cell batteries for battery switching. USAID is about to do the same thing with 250,000 batteries, and 250,000 radios in Sudan. But again, it's the same thing. Only the dedicated internal hardwired battery, not allowing battery switching. I'm wondering if this idea of AA scale solar, which can power solar lights like the BOGO light, which I'm sure you know about, very good light, and the price has increased recently, I think, for some of the reasons that you're talking about. But this idea of small scale, cell phone scale, one LED light scale, AA battery scale, in combination with human power. What do you think of that possibility, and how far do you think that can go?
See, yes, there are the people who came and said about the cranking tools. See, what happens, what we saw in many of the villages, that people are already physically very tired at the end of the day. You're already working in the farm, you're working on the roads, you're physically tired. The success that we found for hand cranks are if they are attached to an existing physical work, like churning butter, taking water out of the well. If you can attach it to those, it makes so much of sense. But if it is a separate issue in terms of if it's only working on crank, it's okay to a novelty to up to a certain time, and then it's looked up as a toy. Because again, it's all about they all care about the use of how do I use it effectively and in a friendly manner. And this is an example which I keep telling people is that, for example, there was this I gave on last Amy Smith's class also, which I talked about convenience, is when we had asked a farmer that why he had bought a 3-light system, he said, I have 2 daughters, one of 19 and one of 21, who are about to get married. And when somebody knocks on our door, I go back, I crank the diesel generator. So for 15 minutes, I compromise the safety of my 2 daughters. Because I have solar light, I switch on when I can see who is there or not. For me, that 15 minutes of safety is so important. I need solar because of convenience. And it's there when I need it. So again, I come back to the first, it's like no amount of Excel sheet could have proven that whether it's economic sense to that person or not. There are a lot of emotional costs that where you and me do while buying anything on a daily basis, that also the poor have that emotions. that you need to delta. We always talk about low cost, low cost, low cost. But who talks about that emotional value? Can you ever put the safety of the two girls on an Excel sheet? So coming back, they also require convenience. They also think that, okay, how can I use it? And that I think we need to move a little away from the hand cranks, which a lot of people are talking about. Yes, sir.
You mentioned in passing that installing 4 lights costs about $450. Is that an average number in terms of watt? How much is the average installing in this cases?
The 4 light is typically a 40 watt panel and a 90 Ah battery with 4 7-watt lights. So it's a 40 watt panel that actually costs around $350 to $400. That's the set cost. Yes, sir.
You made a compelling case against subsidizing solar. And one of the arguments for subsidizing solar or other technology is that it'll propel it to the place where costs will fall, which, if that were true, would inevitably mean that it would be available at lower costs for more people, for more poor people. So what do you think of that kind of paradox?
See, my question is, solar technology is a capital. If you look at the whole chain of different links, okay, you have a chain with different links. One of the link is the technology. Okay, now by subsidizing that link, you're making that link fatter and fatter, while the other links like appropriate financing, appropriate service, appropriate infrastructure, appropriate market linkages are very thin, right? Ultimately, this becomes so fat that the chain breaks. My question is, when the capital good already exists, why subsidize it? Why don't you subsidize the creation of other alternative infrastructure, like appropriate financing at the doorstep, appropriate market linkages? Those are as important as the capital good itself. Today, for example, if I go to Africa and if somebody gives me money that you have to promote sustainable energy sources, the first thing is give me money to create appropriate financing mechanisms in that continent. After 10 years, I'll come to technology. So my question is, subsidizing technology alone, for example, the lady who said 300 rupees a month is expensive, 10 rupees a day is fine, irrespective you subsidize at 150 rupees, she couldn't have bought it. It's a question of how are you going to create the infrastructure to collect the 10 rupees on a daily basis, rather than reducing the cost of the solar good to 150 rupees. That's my question of subsidies. I'm telling that subsidies could be smartly used for other processes that don't exist today. And why can't we do it? For us, we always look at technology because that we can see it in front of our eyes, and we talk about subsidizing. But my question is, why don't we look at the other use the same amount of money, because money is limited. Money is not unlimited. Why don't we use in building up that other processes? And the reduction of the cost today, if you look at when the subsidy in Germany came up, do you know the subsidy always didn't pass to the end user? The manufacturers actually upped their profit margins. How do you tackle to that? The subsidies actually directly went into the bottom lines of the manufacturers. That's my scary part, is the way the subsidies get routed. So it's easier to put in money to build in the other infrastructure and then look at how do we look at lowering the costs actually, rather than subsidizing the good. Yes?
My question is more towards the market part than the technology part. And I worked with Hindustan Unilever, so I was involved in this bottom of pyramid thing, including CK Prahlad's case study and everything.
1 rupee shampoo.
Yeah. So now I share your frustration. I share the frustration that we have a top-down approach to reach out to the markets without understanding the context and the reality of the poor. But my fear is that the more I'm trying to understand large corporations, the more they are stuck in bottom of pyramid approach, and they call these projects infeasible. These projects remain at the outskirts of the boardroom. They never enter in. The people working in these projects never get rewarded. So what I'm trying to say, in spite of all the loudness around this bottom of pyramid, it's not working. So if you are consulting to a CEO of a large corporation, what would you advise him or her about bottom of pyramid?
That's a very loaded question. But first of all, after my Davos experience, I don't want to advise the CEOs. What I would do is remove the notion of CSR. This corporate social responsibility has become a fad and become a fad to deflect the actual problems and greenwash, frankly speaking. That's why I would pick up the example of Vanita Bali, who heads Britannia Biscuits, one of the large biscuits manufacturers in this country, in India, sorry. What she basically did was, under the CSR project, they had a special type of biscuits with more iron content for the schools, which is more expensive, but they said they would subsidize it. She turned around and made that CSR as the main line of business, cutting on her profit margins. If a lot of these CEOs start looking, and if not only CEOs, I mean, my question, just advising the CEOs who's controlled by the board, who's controlled by the shareholders, they need to change their thinking, in the sense that today when we talk about stakeholders, the typical stakeholder is always the shareholder, rather than the end user being equal. End user, employees, management, board, shareholders are all stakeholders. If that uniformity in the thought process comes in, then only we'll have more seriousness in looking at the bottom of the pyramid. And I would challenge that to solve the solutions at the global, at the bottom of the pyramid, the global companies are not capable of doing it. They do not have the field experience. They do not know what the reality is. So if they do not have the field experience, what are they going to show me in the resume? They don't have solutions. It has to be lot of site-specific, localized solutions that need to be spurred up. For that, good policies, good technology interventions, good financial innovations need to happen. And mind you, that's not very difficult. If you go back to what Gandhi said, it's decentralized is the best approach to village sustainability of the villages. I'm sure if he was today there, he would have talked about decentralized energy. But those are decentralized. I mean, he always said do local, local. Today we are talking about organic food and local production. We're going back to what Gandhi said, right? And I think that's where the solution, and none of these corporates, if they had little bit of smart intelligence, because a lot of these big global companies actually don't need, they cross boundaries, right? They can create good solutions. But why the heck then, like for example, software companies in Bangalore have glass buildings with environment-friendly air conditioners? It just doesn't make sense. And they talk about greenwash and they talk about, right? So that's where my question is, they are not capable. I challenge any global company to do a solution, they are not capable of it. It has to be local entities that have to come up.
One of the challenges of sourcing funding is the expectation that whatever solution you come up with to a particular challenge is scalable. So I guess what are your thoughts or recommendations on trying to figure out, like if you see a particular problem that needs to be addressed and find a solution for it, how do you go about, I guess, sourcing funding when, you know, the problem that you're looking at is very customer driven and probably to a specific village?
That's why I said I'm replacing the word scalable with replicable. Can we replicate somewhere else rather than scaling? Because if today's Selco scales up, it will lose the niche of the site-specific what it has done in Karnataka. But where can we create multiple Selcos in different states or different countries or different states to start with? I do not have human capacity to go elsewhere. But you have 4 or 5, start individual funding. If something fails, it fails. But if you start, see today if Selco scales and goes to another state, it's going to implement what it did in Karnataka in a different state. Again, that's not sustainable because the needs, specific requirements of that state are completely different. Can we replicate, our whole philosophy today is like, okay, can we create a business plan for 4 business plans rather than 1 business plan of expanding it? Entrepreneurs are different, the culture is different, the way the people adapt to technology is very different, the need for technology is very different, the market linkages are very different. So how do we create that? I would rather, like when people talk about funding sources, I talk about replicating that with site-specific solutions rather than scaling up. It's at the end of it, if you add it up, it's okay, it's the numbers. So that's why I said, rather than looking at 10 megawatt, 20 megawatt, 100 megawatt, look at a small intervention at one household, at a poor household, and then you'll see the numbers, which are like very typical example being a sewing machine that is used in Gujarat uses 150 watts. What she needs is a 40 watt sewing machine. She's spending 110 watts of inefficiency. One entrepreneur has 20 of those sewing machines. 20 multiplied by 150 is 3,000 watts. She can get away and doing 1,200 watts. So one entrepreneur can save 1,800 watts. Can you imagine the energy, in the power of small? When it adds up, it's a huge number. So we would rather replicate in that model rather than scale. Yeah. Yes, sir.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how you price your products and how you sort of balance revenues versus more access for people.
See, what we do is, because we have 25 centers, we have a break-even. Each center needs to be having a break-even number. There are two things what we do. One is, as I was telling someone, is like suppose the revenues of a certain center is $3,000. Okay, that for break-even. That center could easily get from doing a large installation. Okay, but what we do is, yes, you have to do that. That's a bonus plus 20 houses, minimum of 20 houses. And so that's where we look at both. Like we somehow have balanced over the years to be in the middle, not a company with 20% IRR, nor an NGO with completely a social this one, but somewhere in the middle is that how do we keep targets out? Even the management, fortunately, touch wood, as I say, that we have a management of 5, 2 of them are tree huggers, and 2 of them are hardcore commercial number. My CFO, basically what she does is, when our local manager comes up and says that, oh, we couldn't reach because it's a very poor locality, she would say, that's exactly why Selco is there, because they are poor, but why didn't you reach the numbers? Why didn't you reach the numbers? Why didn't you reach the numbers? She plugs in those. So that has helped. I mean, as when somebody starts up, I said, create a team and then go for business plan, rather than writing a business plan and then going for the team. So that's how we've been able to balance that social mission as well as the commercial mission. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Are you actively looking into small wind?
Actually, let me get a cooking solution done, because that's been the greatest challenge for us, and I'm putting a lot of my resources into getting a good cook stoves, and literally we have actually burnt our fingers practically in looking at cooking. But we want to just plug in and then look at other technologies, which we think.
I was just curious. Well, I don't know anything about stoves. What is the big challenge finding one that's
Having a reliable product. The lot of the products where people have spent millions of dollars is all on project-based funding, in a sense that I have this segmentation, and how do I look at these segmentations? Not realizing the complexities of cooking technologies. Like, for example, you have to have, like, the fuel supply chains are different, whether it's coal, whether it's wood. People either cook rice or whether wheat. There are 4 people in the house, there are 6 people in the house. You need to have an array of cook stoves to meet these different needs. And that, lot of the project development that has happened for cook stoves have been very segmentation or this, and then once you go back for rectification, okay, can I change it? No, my project funding is lost. So a lot of the field tests that have been done is very specific to a certain segmentation of the client base, but no more than that. And as professor behind you, who has also had a lot of experience in testing cook stoves exactly, and Amy, is either there are people, one of the big oil companies, which also wants to look at beyond petroleum, is developed a stove with millions of dollars into it. Do you know they had a electric fan? Where do you get electricity? For many of these places, and you have to have only certain amount of kerosene to start the fire. If you put little more kerosene, the circuit will burn up. If the circuit burns up, the fan will not run. and that you need to have an evacuation policy in the house because the amount of smoke that comes out when the fan does not run. And you know, and our CFO asked a simple question to their team, how many women were there in the team to design? There was 0.
Great. Well, I'd like to once again thank you, Harish, for
Thanks
coming
for
and
having me.
sharing your passion on energy for the poor. And before we close, I'd like to make a couple of announcements. One is that the Energy Initiative Seminar Series will continue in November. On November 18th, Stephen Selkowitz will be talking about building materials and energy, so I encourage you all to be back here in this room in a little bit more than a month. Also, for those of you who are interested in energy challenges for the poor, starting this year, the Mohammed Yunus Poverty Alleviation Challenge this year's challenge is creating affordable energy storage solutions. So there's information about that challenge in the back. There's some flyers that look something like this. And so for those of you who actually are going to take up Harish's challenge about doing something about this, energy storage as well as energy generation is a critical component. And in fact, when you talked about reliability, it's more often the storage which is going to fail than the generation. So for those of you who would like to take a stab at creating affordable energy storage solutions, there's information about that challenge in the back. And in the meantime, there's also refreshments back there. I encourage you to enjoy them and talk to Harish and other folks. So yes, thank you very much for being with us.